Hey everyone, welcome back to First Hand Globetrotting. Today, I'll tell you all about my trip to Guimaraes, Portugal. This was my first time in Portugal, and instead of going to one of the bigger cities like Lisbon or Porto, I started off with a little city up in the north. Before planning my trip, honestly, I hadn't really heard of it before, but the more I read about it, the more interesting stuff I found, and the more I wanted to go. So here's my first-hand guide to Guimaraes, all of the best stuff I saw, I did, and my recommendations for if you're going there for a visit. Be warned, the video clips are from a few years ago, so it's not as high definition as some of my more recent trips, but it should still give you a good idea of what it looks like and what to see while you're there. Since Guimaraes isn't a big city, if you're flying, the closest airport is in Porto. It's one of the busier Portuguese airports, so it should be pretty easy to get from no matter where you're coming from. Once you land, right outside you can catch the Get bus that takes you from the airport to Guimaraes. The drive's a little under an hour and it'll drop you off at the Guimaraes bus station, not too far away from the city center. As far as hotels, I stayed a little bit south of the historic city center. Nice hotel, great view of the city, and a pretty short walk from everything in town. But if I was to do it again, I'd probably stay right in the heart of the old city. There's just something about staying in the older parts of European cities that I really like. The old city was definitely one of my favorite things about Guimaraes. Definitely had a cool old city feel to it. Make sure to take a walk down Rua de Santa Maria. It's a narrow medieval street, really makes you feel like you're surrounded by the old city on every side. The design of the buildings with their balconies looking out over the street and all of the stonework really gave it an obvious old town feel. You'll know you're on Rua de Santa Maria because all the way down the street there are these little alcoves with biblical scenes in them. You won't be able to miss them. Overall, it's a really great street to take a walk down. After that, it's worth stopping by the two main squares in the city, Largo Toural and Largo Oliveira. Largo Toural is bigger and more open, on the edge of the old city with lots of shops and restaurants all around it. A great place to sit in a cafe or by the fountain. There's definitely a lot of action going on there. The other one is Largo Oliveira, right in the center of the old city. It's way more compact, all of the restaurants spill out into it, and there's always lots of people walking by. You definitely get the old city feel if you're sitting there with all the old buildings and churches and monuments all around you. And of course, since it's an old city, you know there's going to be an old city wall, right? I found the best place to see it was at Mumadona Square. Mumadona isn't as exciting as Toural or Oliveira, but it definitely wins points for having the wall right next to it. And as you're walking around the city, it's hard to miss the Church of Sao Gualter. The flowery gardens out front really make it stand out. It's like an intricate garden pathway leading right up to the church. And when you get up to the church and look up, it looks tall and thin with its towers reaching up to the sky. Really cool. But for me, my favorite tourist site was Guimaraes Castle, and it's probably the most recognizable place in town. It's a big castle on the hill, so it's really hard to miss. The castle's from the 10th century, and it definitely has that classic castle look to it. It's got big stone walls, towers, a central keep. It looks like it's right out of a fantasy novel. The insides of the castle aren't as well preserved. A lot of the walls are crumbling and you can't really see any of the old castle rooms, but it's still worth a visit, especially if you like castles. At the base of the castle is the medieval Church of Sao Miguel. It's tiny, but its real claim to fame is that it's where King Alfonso Henrique of Portugal was baptized. And you're going to see King Alfonso Henrique all over town. He was born in Guimaraes, so they pay tribute to him a lot there. Very popular guy. While you're at the castle, make sure to stop by the Palace of the Dukes of Braganza. You can tour inside most of the rooms of the palace or walk around the courtyard, so it's great if you want to see how the dukes would have lived in medieval times. You can visit almost all of the palace except for one part that's still used as the official residence of the President of Portugal when visiting that part of the country. If you want to get a little bit outside of the city, I highly recommend a trip up to Pena Mountain. You can take the cable car from Guimaraes and it drops you off right at the top of the mountain. It's a really fun and easy way to get up there, and you get some amazing views of Guimaraes as you rise above the city. One of the first things you'll probably notice up there is the Sanctuary of Penha. It's not as old as a lot of the other churches in town, but its design makes it fit right in, perched at the top of the mountain. There are some great hiking and walking trails around the mountain with tiny, narrow pathways that take you through some of the really interesting rocky areas. It's very quiet and peaceful, a great way to spend an afternoon. As you're walking along the paths, there are a few other noteworthy places that you need to check out while you're up there. The Pope Pius IX statue is the highest point on the mountain, another great spot to look down on the city and the rest of the mountain. Nearby, you can find the Grotto of Our Lady Lourdes. It's built right into the rock and has a pretty simple design with a few tiny streams of water flowing into some pools. And if you like the idea of things being built right into the rocks, make sure to check out the Grotto of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. It's a little sanctuary built into a natural cave. It's located directly below the Chapel of St. Christopher. As you can see, a lot of the really neat things up on the mountain are small and easy to miss, but they definitely fit in well with the natural feeling you get of being up on a mountain. The mountain also has a hotel, a few shops and restaurants, nothing too fancy really, but good enough to get a bite to eat or grab a postcard. I normally do food recommendations, but this time I'll recommend a drink. This one isn't in Guimaraes, you'll need to go to nearby Porto, but it's definitely worth the trip. Porto is famous for its port wines, so I went to one of the port wine cellars there on the banks of the Douro River. The one I went to was the Callum Port Wine Cellar, and it was a really great time touring the cellar, learning about the history and tradition of port, seeing how it's made, and of course, enjoying a few samples. So that was my visit to Guimaraes, Portugal. Personally, I would definitely recommend it. It's a small city, but it has a lot of Portuguese history and charm packed into such a small package. For me, it was a great first experience in Portugal and definitely made me want to come back and visit the rest of the country. If you're looking for a trip to Portugal but want to skip some of the bigger cities, then Guimaraes is probably going to be a good fit for you. This was my first-hand experience on my trip to Guimaraes, so hopefully this is useful if you're planning a trip of your own. If it was, make sure to click the subscribe button down below, like the video, leave a comment, ask a question, all that stuff. Make sure to follow First Hand Globe on Twitter, First Hand Globetrotting on Instagram if you want to see where I'm headed to next. And don't forget, it's an incredible world out there, so pick up your passport and do some first-hand globetrotting of your own.